By saying Jai Baba to you all. Jai Baba. I'm reminded of something Eric said, which I'm going to share with you now as we're all together and starting it off. I better put my glasses on so I can see you out there. And that is that we say Jai Baba to each other in passing. We say Jai Baba. I just said myself, let's begin saying Jai Baba. But how many of you really know what that actually means? Jai Baba, Eruch would say, means Hail Baba, victory to Meher Baba. But what is inherent in his victory? For him to be victorious in each of us, that means we need to be vanquished. Vanquished in his love. So truly from my heart to your heart, may he all help us to truly be able to say, Jai Baba, and may his love permeate and pervade our lives. Okay, now how do I follow that one? As Sally said, of course, I've been blessed, and there's no way that I can say no to that. It's beyond my comprehension. But whatever it was, whatever was in my past, and as I mentioned to you all before, I love these little pithy sayings that the Mandali would say, and one of my favorites of Mani's was what I shared the other day, that if you pack your suitcase well, because whatever you put in it in this life is bound to come out in the next. So every one of us sitting here has packed their suitcase very well, because it's no small thing to be part of his family. It's no small thing to recognize that perfect man amongst men when he comes again in humanity. And we have all been blessed to be here. We're in Meher abode. We're all striving to live our lives, hopefully in his pleasure, if that's possible, but at least strive for that. And that reminds me of a little incident that is in book 1 here, but I don't know where it is, because when I was picking out incidences, I didn't think of that. But I think it is in there, and since I have started talking about that, I'm just going to share it with you off the top of my head. It's probably better written, but this is it from my memory. I would spend most of my waking life has been blessed to be spent in essentially in Baba's Monash cabin. That cabin was given to Eruch by Baba when Baba finished his Monash work. Does everyone here know what the meaning is of Monash? Okay, what is your name? Oh, Michael, I haven't seen you in so many years. Forgive me for not recognizing you. Including me. So what Monash means is Mon-o-nash. Mon is mind. We all have a mind. And Nash implies that annihilation of the mind. But when Baba did his Monash work, which was the last phase of the new life, many people might think, Monash, you mean the avatar needs to have his mind annihilated? And as Eruch would say, no, of course not. His is the universal mind. It's not that. But in every phase of Baba's ministry, every phase of his work, it was to help some cross-section or some aspect of humanity that is longing, of course, to be his, to reach that destination, which to realize that we are indeed God, but we just don't realize it. So Monash was that period of time when Baba made that work to help those souls who were on that precipice, who were on that trajectory to make that final leap to the destination. And in order to do that, there has to be annihilation of the mind. Why? Because our minds are limited. And to become what you really are means your mind has to expand to include everything, because there's nothing but God. Everything is God. From inanimate to animate to animal to mineral to gas to plant to finally becoming a human being. So that limited mind, that ego mind of ours has to eventually be annihilated so that we can realize what we really are. So that was the phase of the Monash. And Baba did that final work in the cabin, that after he completed it, he told Eric, I've completed my work to my 100% satisfaction, and now you use this cabin as your room. Of course, in Baba language or Baba lingo, one thinks, oh, he got his own room to himself. How far out? No. Sometimes Eric would tell me there might be 14 bedding rolls in his room. So that was his room, and of course, in the end, he was the only one who stayed in it, except in earlier years when his brother would visit. But that's the cabin where Baba did that work. And when Baba was doing that work, what was interesting to me was that the cabin had been the two cabins that were on Seclusion Hill. Everyone aware that there were two cabins on Seclusion Hill, because whenever Baba worked, there was one area that was his work area and one area that was his rest area. They were never the same. So when he would work with the Mus, that cabin that's on the first summit was his work cabin. But when he retired for his rest or relaxation, whatever that may be for the avatar, that was at the highest point, on the highest summit. So Baba, because of inclement weather, had both those cabins disassembled and then brought down, called Padre and carpenters, to make it into one cabin down the hill at Meherazad, and he finished his work in that cabin. And everything from those two cabins that Baba had worked in, with the Mus, his seclusion, and his rest, were combined to make one cabin. But there's one thing that is missing, and that's the second door. So when you come to Meherazad, you'll see that Baba's cabin is there. But if you look carefully, there's a big beam across, and there's huge misshapen nails in it. Why? Because even in that one cabin, Baba had his rest area, which was the eastern side, and Baba had his work area, which was the other side. And they used to hang a tarpaulin or a curtain so that it was a demarcation of that. So after Baba finished, of course, it was given to Eric, and I always found it amusing. Eric's bed is on the work side, not on the rest side. And that was his life. Everything was at arm's length, so that in any emergency, at any time, he could, in the middle of the night, he could find what he needed to carry out Baba's behests. So Eric was like a Boy Scout personified. Be prepared. Yeah. Girl Scout too. Yeah. Well, only what Baba himself would say, naturally. You know, people often will have this feeling The Mandali were supernatural to carry out his work. The Mandali knew everything about Baba. They're like incognito in a sense, perfect behind that. But no, they were born into the roles, no doubt about it. Baba explains this himself, to be his disciples. But what are the disciples in actuality? They are the hands and feet, the nose, the mouth, the arms. They are his helpers, but really the slaves of the avatar. So whatever they were told, they would share with us. Baba's work, as I said, it was for every cross-section of humanity. His universal work, when Baba would talk about his universal work, we can, in essence, and I'm saying this as Davana, who knows nothing, but from what I've gathered, we can, in essence, say, we're all here, sitting in Meher abode, because of his universal work, because of his push to bring those souls who are thirsting for truth and love personified to be here. But again, it goes back to what Mani said. It's because it's not out of nowhere. It's because every one of you have packed your suitcase well. Meaning it's not coming, let's say I'm meeting Terry for the first time. I say, Jai Baba, Terry, so nice to meet you. You don't know me, and I don't know you. That's on the surface. But behind that, the connection, that heart connection, goes way back in time. All of us are his pariwar, his family. So whether we know what each of you are doing in your individual lives is immaterial, because we are connected to the one, the source of all. And I know this is going to sound funny to say this, but I've always found it amusing. And so I'm just sharing with you my silly little thoughts. Baba and Eric had told us this, that Meherabad, and you can extrapolate this also to his centers, in a sense, perhaps in a little bit lesser degree, because those are his main places, but Myrtle Beach, Meher Abode, Avatar's Abode. Baba had said that Meherabad and Meherazad are microcosms of the world. And I remember this so distinctly, I can still see the picture. Eruch was with us in the summer, and Jai Baba, so happy you made it. Jai Baba. So this is summertime when pilgrims don't normally come. And we were sitting out with Eruch in this corner that we kind of call Pendu's Corner. It's right in front of the blue bus, and there's a set of chairs there. And that's usually where Eruch would be in off hours. The post would come. I would be sitting there opening up the letters for him, in readiness. So on a summer day, we're there. And another cute little thing, which actually is in the book, but I can't tell you what page, but it's in the book. I described these scenes in the book. And what was interesting is Eruch was a very witty person. Was a very funny, humorous person. And so when he would want me to get everything ready to do the post, he wouldn't say to me, have you brought the letter opener? No. Have you brought the clips? Have you brought the pens? All the things that are necessary? No, he'd never say that. He'd say, are the surgical instruments ready? And that would be all the implements that we would use for opening up the mail. So now we're sitting there. See, where is my Aaron? See, Aaron, I'm being very good. I haven't called on you yet. Are you ready? Okay. So all the instruments are there, and it's the time of the post. And a couple of the men residents happened to be there. And in those old days, we had what are called water chatties. And these are big, old-fashioned earthenware containers. And it's amazing, but they keep the water really cold. It's almost like refrigerated water if you take from that. So in those days, that's what we had. Later on, because there were so many people coming, we found that it ended up not being as sanitary because people would forget sometimes, and you use a scooper to put it in and you drink this way. But being Western, Eastern mix, it started not being as safe. So Go Hair had us just change it to stainless steel with a spigot. But anyway, this is early years, so that's there. And it was very, very hot, and we're waiting for the post to come. And one of the men residents scoops out some water. Hi there, Che Baba. Scoops out some water and puts it in and starts to drink. And of course, there's conversation going back and forth. And Eruch suddenly sits back and he says, "Why, even Glenn taking water from the chatty has worldwide repercussions." Baba had said that everything that happens in Merazad and Meherabad has worldwide repercussions. So now Glenn McGreeny was there. I remember Gary Kleiner was there. I was there, of course. And the guys would love to kibitz and provoke Eruch. So Gary goes, "Oh, come on, Eruch. How can that be? Worldwide repercussions." Eruch said, "Yes, that's what Baba said. Everything that happens here has repercussions in the world, because Merazad and Meherabad are microcosms of the world. So if we take that, that means that all the circumstances that we find in our worldly life have a metaphor or an analogy in the spiritual life." You follow? So now this is all coming around. See, I haven't forgotten because I thought I didn't have my tangent spotter anymore. So it's all coming around to this. In the world, you have a job, you work in an office, let's say, or you're a teacher, whatever it may be, but there's always the boss, right? And the boss has his own family and relatives and all, and we all know how it works in the world. Some nephew of the boss graduates and he needs a job, but you've been working there, for a long time, and you want that promotion, but you don't really know the boss at all. But the nephew knows the boss. So who gets the promotion? The nephew gets the job. Likewise, in the spiritual parlance of the world, we are all, in a sense, like the nephew, because we are all connected to the source of everything, to the Lord of love. So in a sense, in that way, not only are we connected to each other, but we're connected to Him. So that fast tracks us to the destination. But it is up to each one. And that's why Baba says, understanding has no meaning. Love has meaning. Obedience, meaning obedience to His wish, what Baba has told us, the things that are innate within us, and what Baba has made clear, that has much more meaning. But holding on to my Daman has most meaning. And what that means is whatever the circumstances, whatever the trials and tribulations, all you need do, because you are His, you're part of His family, is to hold on to Him. Baba, okay, Baba, I don't understand why you've put me in this position, Baba. Please, I implore you, help me, Baba, to do what you would wish me to do, to help me have the courage to see it through. He is there with us in every circumstance, but we have to put Him above everything and see Him in everything, because He's the source of all. Okay, now this has all come round, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because this is the last chance I'll have to be with you. I'm not forgetting today. I'm remembering what I wanted it to come back to. See what happens? So, I'm with Eruch. I'm in his room. I'm taking dictation from him. And the way we would do it, and as I've shared in the book 1, is along Eruch's wall would be everything that he would need for Meher Baba. In his life, it had always been that way, but in his consideration also, he put the same set of things on my end of the bed. His bed was his office when he was at Marathon. So he would sit at the head of the bed, and then when he would call me in for dictation or whatever, or read out some correspondence, I would sit at the end of the bed. And it wasn't really until his later years when one day he said to me, you know, I just plopped down and I said, okay, I'm ready for the dictation. He said, you know where you're sitting? You know Baba sat there? I go, Baba sat there? Yeah. Baba used to sit down on his bed and meet with Eruch in the cabin there. So everything, it was permeated and pervaded with his presence. So I'm taking the dictation. I'm trying my best to be the dutiful secretary and get everything down as he's saying it. But life is life, and life, just by the nature of it, has many permutations, many tests that are just waiting to see how focused we are on our Baba. So suddenly, outside the window, a voice starts calling with great urgency, Davana, Davana, come quick, come quick. And of course, what do? Naturally? I jump up. I'm so startled. I jump up. All the papers in the clipboard of the work that I was doing with Eruch fall to the floor. But that voice is so insistent. It keeps calling, Davana, Davana, Davana. I thought maybe someone was having a heart attack. I didn't know what it was. So I rush out of Eruch's room. And there was one of the other Mandali. It happened to be Katie. I don't usually say this, but it was Katie. And she had just gotten some eggs from one of the farmers who came, probably in pay for being helped at Goher's clinic. They had brought fresh eggs. So she said, Davana, I want you to take these eggs up to the house. And I go, okay, Katie, but, I got to go back and finish. She goes, fine, no rush. Now, this is the picture I'm going to show you, which probably can't come through in the book. Eruch is on his bed. It's just a plain little metal bed. He's sitting at the top of the bed. How Eruch would usually sit on his bed would be he'd kind of have one knee up, and balance his clipboard or whatever messages in his hand. And so he's sitting there. But this time he's sitting there like, with the one leg up, really, like this. Silent. Not a word is being just. And I come rushing in and I say, I'm so sorry, Eruch, and I see all the papers I've dropped on the floor. So I start picking up the papers. I go, I'm so sorry I left like that in the middle. I just don't know why I did it. It wasn't even an emergency. I don't know why I'm like this. I should have just, waited or whatever. I just don't know, Eruch. I felt very badly when I came back, especially when I realized it wasn't any emergency at all. So Eruch is watching me, not saying a word, just. And I pick up all the papers. I put them neat. I tend to be a neat person, but of course this all fell out. So I collect all the papers neatly into the clipboard. I jump up onto the bed, sit. I said, I'm ready to do it from where we left off. And he's looking at me. Do you really want to know why you act that way? I go, yes, Eruch, I really do want to know. I really do want to know. All right, I'll tell you. And my heart's going blip, 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 blip. I go, what is it? And he says, you are too interested in pleasing others. Baba gave you the work before you. That is the priority before you, what Baba gave you to do. But no, not you. You hear someone calling you, immediately you rush to please the person outside. Let me tell you, you can never please everybody. And in the process, you will please nobody. So why don't you try just pleasing the one who counts? Meher Baba. And I'll be honest with you, not that I've been lying. So, I don't know if any of you know Paul Kumar, but many years ago I was in France for solace, and I was staying there, and I said something, and I said, well, to be honest, Paul, and he looked at me, he says, to be honest? You mean you're not being honest all the time? But I'm still trying to assimilate that, not to please everybody, to care what other people think, but to keep my focus on what Baba has given me to do. And it's not a simple thing. That's one of my weaknesses. I mean, we're all packed in that suitcase with many weaknesses and lessons we need to learn. And really the truth is, if it takes 8,400,000 lifetimes to realize what you really are, it's a slow journey. We're all slow learners. It takes it over and over and over again to learn this. But see his compassion. So then Eric smiles at me. He says, but I had to learn it too. Do you want to hear what happened to me? And of course I was always delighted and ready and wanted to hear everything he wanted to share with me. So then Eric told me this story. So now we're going back in time. Baba's in Bangalore, which is in the south of India, and Eric is young. It's in the early years of his being with Baba. And Baba puts Eric in charge of the must ashram there. Now, being in charge of the must ashram doesn't mean that he's working with the must. I just want you to understand that when you were asking about Baba's work. It's not that the Mandali were given Baba's work, no. But being in charge meant keeping everything in readiness for Baba when Baba would come. And Baba was very, very meticulous and careful about everything for his beloved children, which were the musts. And what are the musts? They are those souls who are so intoxicated with God, sometimes stuck between planes of consciousness, sometimes on a plane of consciousness, but so intoxicated with the visions and sights of not at the destination, but of those things that are part of the illusory travel towards the destination, that Baba gives them a spiritual push by working with them. And what is his work? He wants them not to really recognize him as who he is, but to give them his love, to give them his time, washing them. Some of them, don't wash for eons and eons because they're totally inattentive to the body, because all they're thinking about is God. And Eric had said that Baba did explain to them that a must, because of their absolute whole focus on God, is unaffected by worldly things. So they can be in a urinal, they can be in the dirtiest place, they can be filthy themselves, but in a way they're unaffected by it because their whole being is on that trajectory of remembering God. While as for all of us, of course, we'd probably come down with germs, sick, all these things. Why? Because we're aware of our body and all. So being in charge meant getting everything ready. Baba would bathe the musts, so all the buckets had to be ready. But the musts themselves had to be in a clean environment for Baba to come in. And just as they weren't aware of their bodies in terms of sickness or filth and all, many of them also weren't aware of bodily functions. So then everything had to be also cleaned in that way too. If a must, let's say, had diarrhea, well, you wouldn't let him just sit in it. No, it had to be constantly cleaned, the sheets changed, everything ready for Baba. And for Eric, that also meant making sure that the quarters of the must were clean. Now, mind you, this must have been the late 30s, early 40s when Baba was in Bangalore. So Eric, he's got this job. He's in charge of the musts. He's young. He wants to please Baba. So he cleans it as best he can. He puts on clean sheets. He makes sure everything is clean and everything. And then Baba comes in. And as soon as Baba comes in, he starts noticing a little dust on doorway, something out of place in the room, and he says, "Didn't you follow my orders? This is your job. This is how you do when I've given you something to do. This isn't clean. This isn't pleasing. This is how you treat my beloved children, the musts. Clean it again." So then Eruch cleans it again. And he thinks to himself, okay, this time I'll do more. Gets everything ready, puts clean garments, makes sure Baba's coming in 10 minutes, but he goes back again to make sure the water's still at the right temperature. Everything's there. He says, okay, now it'll be fine. I've done everything. But Baba comes in. And again, he finds some little thing that, none of us would even notice. But Baba points to it and says, you didn't clean that? That's how you care for them? That's not the way. This goes on and on. Finally, by the fourth or fifth time, Eruch says to himself, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm going to do it from top to bottom. He gets up early in the night. He washes the entire walls of the room, the ceiling, the floor, the bed, every single thing he can possibly think of, and then he stands back and he thinks. Mind you, we all have egos. This is what I'm trying to say. They were chosen for those roles, no doubt about that. And in a way, you could say, or I feel, you could call them the most incredible, greatest souls in the universe, because they are serving the Lord. But they also had their individual personalities. And the way the universe is set up, which is God's compassion for all of us, He gives them, they each have different personalities according to the role that they're to play, which allows them then to be born to a family, to be kids, to be teenagers, to have this quirk, this happened, this mistake, that mistake, so that they can be also an inspiration to us. Oh, even they had this problem. Okay, Baba, I get it. All right, let me try harder. That's how I see it. I'm just sharing with you my read on things because I'm up here. You've asked me to come. So Eruch sits back and he puts his hands, he's young, and he goes, this time you won't be able to find anything. There's nothing. Everything is perfect. Baba comes in. He looks around. He's looking everything, and Eruch just kind of, how young, what should I say, the bravado of youth, So he's feeling a little, you're not going to get me this time. Way up in the farthest corner where the ceiling attaches to the wall, suddenly a cobweb has appeared. And Baba says, how many times do I have to tell you to pay attention, to keep this place clean? Look at that. You didn't clean over there? And Eruch just blows up this time. He can't hold it anymore. He says, I cleaned it. I tell you, it must have just happened now. No matter how hard I try, I can never please you. And then Baba says the lesson for everyone. Yes, that's true. You will never please me until you are no more. But you can strive not to displease me. And that's the story that Eruch told me when I went rushing out trying to please others instead of paying attention to the work Baba gave me. And it's a lifelong lesson for all of us to not be affected by what others think, what others want us to do. Our focus is Him. So when I say that, don't misunderstand. That doesn't mean not to be kind to others, not to be loving, not to be compassionate, not to let go, not to let, how shall I say, give in, not to give way. All those are qualities we have to learn in order for our ego, our separate self, to be ground down, to become what we are. But how we do it is what's important. Not that it's just, okay, I'm going to try and please Ellen. No. Okay, I'm going to try and please the Baba within Ellen. She's just playing her role. So I got upset and spoke out. Is it Ellen? No. It's the Baba within Ellen giving me this lesson. What would Baba want me to do? Embrace Ellen and say, sorry, I lost my temper. Let's forget it now. That was the old, the past. Past is a frozen lake. Let's move forward. Now I'm going to stop here because I had brought with me, is it okay? We've been talking about the first book and the things that are in it and how it came about. I think I've already shared with you all, right? So this is a book that's a trilogy. Why is it a trilogy? Because when I was trying to figure out how to write this book, and it took me a long time because, again, other people kept saying, you've got to write a book, you've got to write a book. But I thought, how can I write a book that Eruch would be happy with? Because he was not someone, as the slave of the Lord, that would want to be glorified. He would want his Lord glorified. All focus should be on the Lord and not the slave who carries out his behests. But in time, what I felt was, if one person, if even just one of you read something that could help you in your life with Baba, then I think Eruch would be happy. And that's why the book is written in kind of an unusual way, where there's the episodes of being with him in our time, my time, meaning when the Mandali were alive, and in my interactions with him, so that as a vehicle of that, I could share what, not that he gave to me, but he was giving to me as a vehicle for all of us, because those are merely the aspects of truth. And as Eruch would say, and Baba would reiterate to them, truth is always uplifting. Everything is a part of the truth, but it is not the whole truth. So I thought if there was some way I could share episodes of life, then maybe it would help someone to do that. But of course that made the book a lot longer. So the first book is from Eruch's birth till the moment when Baba announces that he and the companions he's chosen to go with him in the new life will be leaving all old life behind. And he told his old lovers, don't ever expect to see me again. And at his last visit to Eruch's family, before Baba and Eruch drove off to begin that new life, Baba said to the family, burn my clothes, burn Eruch's clothes. You will never see me again. You will never see your elder son again. He is mine. So at that point in time, book one ends, and what I'm hoping will be out in this new year, by the end, before the end of 2026, is book two. And book two begins where that left off, and it starts with the new life. So I thought it might be fun for people who have already read the book, and hopefully will encourage others to want to read the book. I thought I would read you the first night of the new life. Is that okay? This is for book two. Okay, the first night, October 16th, 1949. I still remember, now mind you, I'll let you know, this is Eruch speaking now. I still remember that morning. You see, Baba allowed me the freedom to be frank with him. And when he had told me about his plans for the new life, I immediately had remonstrated about the difficulties which would be there if the women were accompanying him. How would we manage with the women? Baba had assured me that once we were in the new life, it would be different. Don't worry, Baba had told me. The women will be companions, just like the rest of you. Now, I'm just going to interject for those of you who may not be aware. The men that were living with Baba and the women who were living with Baba, both were absolutely focused on Meher Baba, but in a sense they lived in separate worlds, because Mera was given the order at that time, not even voices of men were to be heard by her. She wasn't to see men, wasn't to touch men, men weren't to touch her, and that continued, of course. But on the men's side, throughout his life, whatever the job that Baba was giving to Eric to do, which had myriad different functions. He might be asked at a time to do marketing and bring marketing back. He might be going on a must trip with Baba. He might be attending to him personally. Whatever it was, the men's world and the women's world were so separate that I remember Eric telling me at one point when they were in the new life and they were staying, I believe it was in outside of outside of Dehradun, in Rishikesh, they came back and bringing Baba back to the women's quarters, and there were all these 100 steps up to the women's quarters. But Eric in the Tonga waiting with Baba, because Baba was going into the women's quarters, and he had to wait for him to take him back to the men's quarters. Eric sat in the Tonga with his back to the house, the building, because even by accident, his gaze shouldn't fall on the women's side. So naturally, when Baba has the women coming on the new life, it's understandable. He's asking, how in the hell are we going to do this with the women being in such a cloistered way, you see? And Baba is saying, no, 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 they're just going to be companions, no problem. I drove the car to the main bungalow and parked it in front as Baba had directed. Soon he appeared and got in the front seat next to me. Then we waited. I could see Goher and Mani and Meru on the veranda, but none of them were making a move towards the car. I remember wondering, what is going on? A half hour passes by, and still none of them have moved. More time passes. Then Goher goes inside the house. A few minutes later, she comes out again. I'm watching as she walks around to Baba's side of the car and whispers something in his ear. Baba tells me, get the curtain. So whenever they drove, if Mera was involved in the women, a curtain would be put up so that the driver, meaning Eric or whoever, but I'm using Eric as the example here, he's driving the car, Baba's in front with Eric, but the women are going to be sitting in the back seat of that car. Mera always had the curtain, so that's what they're inferring here. Baba tells me, get the curtain. After all these years, Mera feels too shy to sit in the car without it. As I put it up, I'm thinking, I knew it. These women always cause problems. And he said it would be different. Once the curtain was secured, Mera, Mani, and Meru sat down in the back seat of the car. But where was Goher? Baba told me to honk the horn to hurry her up. A few minutes later, Gover came out. Baba, she said, the door is stuck. I can't shut it. We had had a good monsoon that year, so the dampness must have caused the door to swell. Baba told me to get out and help with the door. I just gave it a tight kick and pushed hard against the frame, and it shut. But all the time, my mind was grumbling about those women. And Baba had said it was going to be different in the new life. It was drizzling when we drove away from Marazad. It had been prearranged that until we crossed the railway tracks at the manned level crossing, we were still in the old life. At that time, when you came here from Pune, you had to cross the railway line. There was no bridge, only the manned level crossing, with 2 gates on either side of the tracks. The old life people, whom Baba had instructed to come, were already assembled at the crossing to see Baba off. Among those old lovers witnessing Baba and his new life companions, send-off were his youngest brother, Adi Jr., Savik Damania, Padri, and Sarosha Rani. Both Adi Jr. and Sarosh had brought their cars. As Baba stood at the crossing, a drizzle of rain began falling. Sarosh, whom Baba had appointed as one of the arrangement wallahs, asked Baba if he would permit Adi Jr. and himself to follow the companions in their cars to the first halt, just in case the drizzle became a downpour. Surprisingly, Baba agreed. At the first gate on the Nagar side stood those who were to remain in the old life. Baba had told us that we should wish them well, and when we turned our back on them and crossed the second gate, we were then in the new life. Baba instructed the new life companions to touch the ground of Meherabad before turning their backs on the old life as they knew it. Then he himself bent down, solemnly touching the damp earth with his hand. What must the hearts of his old life lovers have been feeling as they witnessed this poignant moment? Raising his arms skyward, Baba told those assembled to repeat the following prayer. O God, make this new life for all of us a success and joy eternal. And with this invocation, the march began. Baba and the companions hadn't gone even a mile when nature gave her answer in response to Baba's prayer. Suddenly the sky darkened and the clouds burst, spilling their rain blessings on the heads of the companions as they walked along the road. Of course, in this new life, there were no raincoats or umbrellas to shield any of them. And Baba, in a jovial mood, declared to the companions, a good sign. With the rains continuing to pelt them, the companions were soon drenched, and Baba agreed to allow Sarosh to drive them the rest of the way to Supa. It's a small village about 17 miles from here, between Ahmednagar and Pune. I remember that first halt. We had stopped at a rest house for the night. Now that we were in the new life, we had left all amenities behind. We didn't carry bedding rolls with us, so when we entered the rest house, I looked around to see where Baba might sleep. My duty was to look after Baba's physical well-being, and I felt that it would not be good for him to sleep on the cold stone floor. I was wondering what to do when I suddenly noticed the large dining room table. It was an old piece of furniture built with a base of 4 legs upon which a board would sit for the tabletop. Baba, would you like to sleep on the table? I spread out his coarse blanket and folded his great woolen coat to make a pillow for his head. When everything seemed ready for him, I went outside to keep watch. It must have been a little past midnight when I heard a huge crash. I felt frightened, as I didn't know what had happened, and it was such a loud bang. Baba didn't clap, so I called out, Baba, may I come inside? The door was shut, so I waited until I heard his clap, then opened the door and entered the room. I was so surprised to see Baba standing there by the side of the table. Baba, what happened? I heard such a loud crash. Baba spelled out on the board, this is the first time I have slept so soundly. As I turned over in my sleep, I started to slide down the side of the board. I jumped off the table just as the board hit the floor with a bang. Baba smiled as he gestured, a good start to our new life. So that was the culmination of the first night of the new life. It gives one a clue into his mood and ours, because our feelings were reflections of his. It was he alone who generated the pulse and mood of the old life and the new life. When he was happy, we genuinely felt happy. Those of us who lived with him were not perturbed or disturbed by whatever was happening, because our purpose in going on the new life had nothing to do with old life or new life, but had everything to do with being with him and following him. And so that's the first night of the new life. But I chose this because when I was reading it, trying to pick out something for you, I thought, you know, that last paragraph, that's true for all of us. We can begin to live that new life in whatever we're doing. When we wake up, he's given us a new life to live for him. When we go to sleep at night, just as Eruch said, we can say, Baba, I'm ready. Take me into your lap. All my thoughts, my words, my deeds, whatever my actions be, my weaknesses, my strengths, I offer them to you. And dedicate any strengths I have to you. And then we go about our life. And isn't that so freeing? Because it means once you've given it to him, you just live. Because you're living a new life. And when you go to sleep, you dedicate that to him. That new life has come to an end. It's ready for you to go to sleep. So all that happened, good, bad, indifferent, everything that was difficult, everything that was joyous, everything where we felt proud that we had done something great, everything where we feel our weaknesses, that we can't manage it. All that belongs nowhere but at his feet. And if we do that, then we are free. Because the comfort is that now it's in his hands. We're holding on to his Daman, his being. And so what else is there? Whatever happens, okay, Baba. That's how we can all strive to live. I'm not saying that I'm able to live that perfectly, nor am I saying that it'll be easy for you all to live that perfectly. But if we can remind ourselves what Baba said, which is this new life is eternal, even if there is no one to live it. When you think about that, what does that mean? That eternity of it. And money used to add to that, which I found also very beautiful. She said, Baba walked that new life. And because that perfect one walked that new life, then we can strive to walk in those footsteps, to strive to live that new life. So that's where book 2 begins, is with the new life. And it ends with Baba and Eric experiencing the second accident, of which Eric was the driver, which, of course, changed their lives irrevocably and irretrievably. But that's book 3. And you're going to have to wait a little longer for that. You know, so any questions, anything anyone has on their mind from the last meetings they want to ask or share? Okay, Clive. Uh-oh, I'm ready. Uh-oh. Yes, I do. I know that. The what was going on with the trust at that time. It well, it wasn't. I'm not doubting what he said to you, nor am I doubting how you remember it, because we each remember things uh, differently and accordingly. But it is true. Baba did ask Eric to become the chairman, and Eric said, "Please, Baba, release me from that duty." And Baba then said, "Well, will you be a trustee?" And Eric said, "No, Baba, please, please, I don't want to be part of the trust, but I promise you from the outside, I will look after that trust." And ironically, what happened is that Eric became the special invitee of the trust. Now, I know this because in latter years he had me come. I was never a trustee, don't get me wrong, but I came to help Eric, because notes had to be taken at the meeting and all this. So he would have me come at the end. And he would sit at a little table. Actually, I think I even have a picture in here of that. Anyway, he would sit separately from the rest of the trustees, but he would give input when it was needed, and he remained doing that till the very end of his life, and said that he had made a promise to Baba that unless he was on his deathbed, he would attend every meeting. And literally, he kept to that because sometimes he would go at the very end when he was so ill and all, but he saw to the trust. But there's more to that, which maybe also you heard, Clive. When Eric said that to Baba, Baba said, "Okay, all right." But then Baba wanted to have Merwan be one of the trustees and said, how about Merwan being the trustee? Hmm? Merwan is Eric's younger brother, 14 years younger than him. And Eric again said, "Please, Baba, release Merwan from this too. Don't let him, allow him not to be involved in the trust." And Baba again agreed. What did you want to add before I continue? No, I'm not denying what he told you. Yes, because that's part, yes. But that wasn't to Erich, that was to Soros. Maybe Erich also said it to you. I don't want to quibble. I accept everything you said. I'm only sharing with you from what I remember I've been told. I'm going to share a story which has to do with this, but I'll just finish up. Kutum Shastri, Erich did say how about him because He knew him from when they went out in the fiery free life. He had been involved in finance and banking and everything and thought he would be good. But I really don't want to spend the time talking about this aspect of the trust today, because I don't think it's going to help any of us love Baba more, get closer to Baba. And from my standpoint, and since I'm up here, I agree with what you say. All these things happened. Each one remembers differently. And that's why I want to share this story, which I think will be valuable to not only the Los Angeles group, it's been very valuable to me in my life. One day, Eric happened to mention that Baba had called a number of people together, very close lovers of Baba, and they were sitting in a circle, and Baba was speaking out. Eric was interpreting and all, and some of the lovers would carry notebooks, like one that John would probably remember, Hoshan Barucha. Remember how he'd always be meticulously writing down what Eric said. And half the time later when Eric would get it, he'd say, oh my God, he didn't get it right at all. But the same thing would happen in Baba's time. He would take meticulous notes. But he wasn't the only one. Other people did too. But other people also might be like Patrick and just sit there very attentive, trying to remember what Baba said. So Baba has, and these are close ones, mind you. This is not just a big darshan time. These are the ones that Baba has selected and brought to be here with him. So Baba's giving them information, discoursing, whatever it is. And suddenly, he just stops in the middle. And he says, Todd? And Todd is at attention. He says, yes, Baba? You've been so busy writing down everything. Read out for everyone what I said. So now Todd reads out his very, carefully written down notes of what Baba is saying. And Baba looks at Todd and he goes, I never said that. What have you been writing down? Then Baba turns to Clive, and he says, okay, Clive, you haven't taken, not really Clive and Todd, but I'm using your names to bring you all into the circumstance. Okay, what did I write? What did I say? You weren't taking notes, you were paying attention, so tell me what I said. And Clive then says, well, Baba, I recall you said this, this, and this. And Baba said, did I? Really? You didn't get it right. He goes to Dr. Ajang. He goes to Patrick. He goes to Diane. He's going to Michael. He's going around the entire thing. And he says, none of you got it right. Weren't you hearing? Don't you have eyes, ears? I've been sitting here telling you, and not a single one of you wrote it down correctly, heard it correctly. Why is that? And then Baba said this, and this is the part that I think can help us to try and refrain from judging others, to try and be more open-hearted in our dealings when individuals have an opposite opinion or a different story, or maybe we remember it one way and the other person remembers it another way. Baba said, none of you got it right, and yet you're here in front of me. You're not even at a distance, you're right here. How many times did I repeat certain things? And none of you wrote it down? None of you remembered it correctly? Nothing that is said here is what I said. How can that be? And then he paused and he said, it's because each one of us remembers according to who we are, according to our impressions. Our memory and impressions, in a sense, color what we remember. It's neither right nor wrong. It's not that. It's our memories accommodate who we are, so that one person remembers it one way and another person remembers it another way. because in their perspective, from their perspective, this is it. And then memory accommodates that. So it's a wonderful thing to remember, I think, in our lives, because it can open our hearts even a little bit bigger. As Eruch would say, he'd say to me, he'd say, your heart is so tiny. My heart has been dilated by the avatar. And dilated means opened up, stretched to accommodate. Because everything is a part of the truth. But it's not the whole truth. Truth is always uplifting. But when one thing Clive said, how much time do I have, Karen? I think my voice won't hold for 3 hours is the problem. I was going to share, all right, I'll try and do this very quickly. No, but I'm just trying to figure out what time it was. What Clive was saying, one of the very few times, of course, the trust came in 1959, so that's later in life. But after the new life, when what I read to you was the first night of the new life, but by the end of the new life, Eruch said that when Baba finally from Hyderabad and they went on their travels to see the last must, the last poor, and were walking down the road, and finally Meherzad was sort of in sight, and Baba said, let's complete the Monash. The 2 cabins are still there. Eruch and all, he thought to himself, oh my God, thank God. He said he described himself as like an old horse that's been racing and racing and racing, and finally sees the stable is in sight. If I can just make it that far, make it that far, make it that far. Because he said inside he was totally trembling. Not tremors on the outside, but at the inside, he felt he was about to collapse at any minute. Because being on the new life, as euphoric and beautiful and inspiring it sounds, was not an easy thing. The men's bed essentially was the ground. And don't forget, they started on October 16th. That meant during new life, winter, they're moving to the north of India, which is really cold. And we're still sleeping outside on the ground and getting up at 4 a.m. and having to find water and having to do this. And the men who had to care for the animals had to get everything ready for the animals. So it was a constant. And Eruch, of course, had to be with Baba at all times. That was his job. So he would be outside where Baba was sleeping, but he was on watch and outside. So by the end of the new life, he really felt his body was shattered. So finally, Monash is completed. I've already told you in the beginning how Monash ended up at Meherzad in the Monash cabin, made from those 2 cabins. And a few days goes by, and Eruch, like the rest of the 4 companions, companions who were the only ones left at the end. The others had gone back, been sent back. They were just exhausted, so, they thought, oh, now if it can just go back to the old life, that seems like heaven compared to this new life. Maybe at the most 5 days, 6 days a week goes by, and Baba calls the men together. And he says to Eruch, now I want you to go to town, and I want you to see to our passports and our visas, because next on the agenda will be the life, which was divided into the fiery free life, the complicated free life, the life. So Eruch is hearing all this, and he's thinking, oh my God, how in the world? I can barely stand up. Baba wants me to go to the West with him. He doesn't say anything, but Baba says, so get our visas, start the paperwork at Adi's office. We're going to be going to the West. I'm going to be visiting Myrtle Beach, Meher Center in Myrtle Beach. We're going to be going to California. All of this is being chalked out. It was the 1952 trip. Eruch doesn't say anything at first. But then when they meet again the next day, Baba says, and with Baba, everything is quick, quick, quick. You don't loiter around and let things lie around. And it was never Eruch's way to do that. As a matter of fact, he told me that he used to sometimes get up in the middle of the night and finish the correspondence so that if Baba, when he met with the men in the morning, said, we've got that letter to do, Eruch, you have to get that letter done, Eruch could say, Baba, I've already done it. All it needs, is your approval. So, you didn't procrastinate with Meher Baba. But Baba turns to Eruch and he says, so have you done the work? And this time Eruch says, Baba, please, please, please forgive me, but I cannot go with you, Baba. I can't do it. And Baba said, I told you to get that done. Just get that done. He doesn't say anything more, but then the next day again comes up. And again, Eruch hasn't done the work. And this time he stands before Baba. He says, Baba, please forgive me, but I cannot go with you. I will be a burden on you. I will be a drag on you. I won't be able to take care of you, Baba. I can't do it. I'm totally trembling inside. How am I going to care for you that way? I can't do it. And Baba says, if you're not going to obey me, then what is the use of your living with me? Then get out. And Eruch turns to Baba, and he's walking towards leaving Baba's presence. And he says, I would rather leave you than be a drag on you, Baba. And Baba says, get out. And then Baba, in a huff, one could say, turns on his heels and goes back to the women's side. It was lunchtime and all. And Eruch goes to his little cabin. Remember, he's been given the Monash cabin now. So he's just in the cabin alone, and he thinks to himself, okay, I guess I've got to go. Well, I'm young, I'm strong, I can dig ditches, I guess, do something. I just will take what belongs to me and leave everything for Baba. And as he's sitting thinking about this, he thinks to himself, well, these pajamas I'm wearing, pajama pants, those little elastic or drawstring pants they would wear. Baba gave me these. I can't wear these. And he thinks the t-shirt too. It's not my t-shirt. Baba gave it to me. I can't go in the t-shirt, can't go in the pants. Never mind. He sees on the hook a single little rough blanket that they'd used during the new life, and so it's in his room. And these were very rough blankets made out of the lamb's wool that shepherds would use. And they were good for the new life. Why? Because being used by shepherds, the the fur or the coating of the goats and all had this oily substance that would be part of the inner portion of where the fur would be sheared off normally. But if they were used for making the blanket, that allowed the blankets almost to have a slightly oiled surface so that water ran free of it. So when you don't have a raincoat, you don't have an umbrella, you don't want things to get wet, at least the blankets, water would run off them. So he says to himself, well, I'll just cover myself in a blanket and I'll go. And then he looks at the blanket and he says, wait a second, I can't take that blanket. Baba gave me that blanket. It's not mine to take. And then as he's sitting there, he thinks, all right, I'll go naked. But then the thought, you see how we were talking the other day about befriending the mind, how it can take us in one direction and then the next direction. It can bring us to him, but if we don't hold the reins, it can take us away also. So Eric's just sitting there, and now his mind thinks, all right, I'll go naked. But I can't go now because people would know. They know me because I'm been with Baba all this time. It won't look good for Baba to be people seeing his disciple walking naked along the roadside. I can't do that. It wouldn't be good for Baba. See how the mind is? He's still thinking about Baba. So he says, all right, I'll wait till nightfall. Because, of course, at night, there's a lot less chance you're going to run into anyone, right? It makes perfect logical sense. So he says, I'll wait till the night. But then a little niggling worm comes into his mind. And then he thinks to himself, but how can I leave? Who is to leave and who is to stay? Because I've given my life, my being, to Meher Baba. And when that thought hits him, suddenly there's a knock on the door, and it's another one of the Mandali, and they tell Eruch, Baba says you are to spend the night, eat your dinner here, go to sleep, and your fate will be sealed in the morning. So now, early morning, again a knock comes, and Eruch is handed a piece of paper, and the Mandali says, Baba says you're to read this and do it, and nothing more is to be said. So now Eruch gets this paper, which if I have seen, I mean it's in archives now, but it was like a full-scape size paper. And in it, Baba tells that Eruch and Pendu will do the arrangements and help Eruch. But Eruch is to go out throughout India and Pakistan to give Baba's message of love and truth, to explain about the new life and Monash, and to also ask those whom they meet. And mind you, this is like throughout India and Pakistan, not just people who already love Baba, but you're talking about through the country, but to find out those who are willing to give money in Baba's cause, to give their home in Baba's cause if he comes to visit the place. Mind you, when Baba comes, there has to be a place for him to stay. It's just like Karen had to have a place for me to stay. That's life. And lastly, who is willing to give their lives for Meher Baba? And as Eruch would always mention it, and always made me laugh, he'd say, you know, it's a lot easier. People would rather give their lives than their money for Baba, but, you know. But anyway, this was all asked, you know. So all this they had to set out. They weren't allowed to, they were given 2,000 rupees each, but they could not buy anything outside. That money was like an emergency fund. And if no one offered to give them bus fare or train fare to the next place, they could use it for that, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But only food that is offered, that was it. Only where they stayed, where people offered them to stay. And like I said, all this Eruch is being told he's to speak out publicly all over India and Pakistan. All right, so he reads it, and then the men gather to be with Baba when Baba comes over from the women's side. And Baba says to him, did you read it? Eruch says, yes, Baba. And he says, oh, all right, I don't want to hear anything more. But inside, what would you feel? And I even said this to Eruch one day, and I won't give you the punchline to the end of it, but I said, my God, but if you're totally exhausted, trembling inside, feel like you can't care for Baba. It's much harder to go through India in those years, early 50s, 1952. I mean, India didn't have the amenities that the West had in 1952. And furthermore, as Eruch said to himself, my God, this is like a vengeance on me, because I'd have Baba's company in the West, even if I, felt I was dying and felt I could hardly stand up. But here, I don't have Baba's company. I'm not with Baba. I'm separated. And he expects me to speak out Baba's message of love and truth, explain all these things. I'm not a public speaker. So all these thoughts are going through his mind. But he doesn't say anything. But of course, nothing goes past Meher Baba. So when he'd sit there, Baba would say, why do you have such a long face? Why do you look so sullen? At first he'd say nothing. He'd say, no, speak out. Baba, I'm your valet. I can wash your clothes. I can sweep your floor. I can make your bed. I can help you in so many ways. I'm your driver. I speak, interpret the messages. But I'm no public speaker. I don't know anything about that. And Baba looks at him. Don't you have eyes? Haven't you ears? What have you been doing all these years by my side? You don't know my message of love and truth? And Eruch again says, but Baba, I don't know how to speak out. That's not my line. I'm someone in the back who does all this. Baba says, all right. And Eruch would always say, see his compassion. He says, all right. Before you begin to speak, all you have to say is, Baba, you want me to speak? Then you speak. And then Baba smiled at him and said, just do that and then see the fun. And Eruch said he doesn't know, to the end of his life, he said, he has no idea how he was able to get through 7 months of doing this. But he did. But it was day and night and night and day, nonstop. He said sometimes they would have a program and he'd go, but the guest, the family that was taking care of him would finally say at midnight, he has to go on the bus to the next village the next day. I think you should all go home. He needs some sleep. They need to sleep. And so they would then be taken to the host's place to lie down. And the host would say, here's your bedding rolls. You can sleep here. And Eruch would look at, Eruch was a very observant person. I mean, even if you were unobservant, you would notice this. He'd go, 1, 2, 3 bedding rolls here, but there's just Pendu and me. Why is there a 3rd bedding roll? And the host would say, oh no, I'm your host. I just want to sleep with you in case you need anything. I put my bedding roll next to you. So then they'd lie down to go to sleep. Not 5 minutes had he put his head on the pillow when the guest would put his hand on his elbow and say, Eruch, this evening you were talking about such and such. I don't understand. What did Baba mean about the big zero in Monash and this and that and annihilation? I don't understand it. Can you please explain it to me? And then Eruch felt it was his duty. So he would explain. And poor Pendu would be lying next to him and pull his pajama and say, would you tell him to go to sleep, for God's sakes? Enough of it. Can't you shorten it? Enough of it. But Eruch would say, how could I do that when Baba had given me this to do? I had to do it. It was my duty. So he would go on and do it. Night and day and day and night. And Eruch was actually speaking. And I believe he may have been in Hamyapur. I can't be quite certain, but I think he was in the north of the country. When finally, as he's speaking to the crowd, a message comes. Meher Baba has been in an accident in Prague, Oklahoma. 1952. Remember, May 24th, 1952, Baba had the accident. Baba had wanted Eruch to come. Eruch had always been the driver for Baba. And here Eruch was out. Immediately, he folds up the message, doesn't say what it's about, but tells Pendu, we have to get back to Meherabad. They go all the way back to Meherabad. And on the way, Pendu became ill with a kidney stone, so he had to care for Pendu in the hospital. Finally, they reach Meherabad, only to find a message from Meher Baba. Go back out and continue your tour. So then he had to continue the tour to the very end. But what Eruch would say at the end is that through that experience of having to stretch himself beyond what he felt were his own limitations, through that he said it was like a shining sun on the horizon of his life, because he realized that his saying no was his ego, his pride. I've always taken care of Baba. Now I'm shattered. I can't take care of Baba. I don't want to be a drag on him. That's all the mind, the ego mind. Instead of saying, if we were absolutely surrendered to him, there wouldn't be any question. It's just, thy will be done. He'll see to it, thy will be done. So he said this was like a shining sun on the horizon of his life, because it brought him so much closer to Baba, because he began to see that if he wants it done, he gets it done. And I'm sitting up here, and I guess he's gotten it done, although I would have never dreamt of being up here with you all doing this. So may this be some shining sun on all our lives, that if he wants you to do it, he will give you the courage, the strength, the way to do it. It doesn't mean it'll be easy. Eruch had to go through it. They had to do it. Baba didn't do it for them. Baba didn't tell them how to do it. But because he wanted it done, he made it possible to be done. And those places that Eruch and Pendu visited, when Eruch finally came back and saw Baba, Baba had to make a huge chart of all the places. And Baba sat down on that chart. This is actually in book 2. Sat down on that chart and picked out all the places that would be the framework of his fiery free life. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.